Okay, so have you ever wondered how AI actually understands what you're saying? Like, not just recognizing words, but
hmm
actually getting the meaning behind them, the humor, the emotion, all of that.
It's really incredible how far we've come, right? I mean, think about those early
Oh,
chatbots.
yeah.
It felt like talking to a wall, you know?
Totally.
You'd say something and it would just spit back some canned
Like
response.
it just pulled it straight out of the dictionary or something?
Exactly. But now, NLP, natural language processing, has totally revolutionized how machines understand us.
It's true. So how did we go from those basic bots to something they can actually, like, understand? Take us back to the beginning.
Well, imagine those early systems were like trying to understand a language just by memorizing a phrase book.
Okay.
They can only handle the specific phrases, nothing more. But with machine learning, things started to change, especially with deep learning, where NLP started learning patterns from tons and tons of data, just like we learn from experience.
So instead of just knowing words, the AI is figuring out how we actually use them, the way language flows naturally.
Exactly. These deep learning models can analyze massive amounts of text and figure out not just the connections between words, but also phrases, entire sentences even. And that's how they can figure out context, what we mean, how we're feeling, all of that. They can even generate text that sounds like a person wrote it.
Okay, so how does that actually work? What's going on behind the scenes to make that happen?
Think of it like taking a sentence and just like dissecting it,
Okay.
breaking it down into its individual parts, the words, the punctuation, everything. That's called tokenization.
Okay.
And that's the foundation of how NLP analyzes what we're saying.
So it's like breaking down a sentence to understand its DNA or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And to go even deeper, NLP uses these really cool techniques like stemming and lemmatization. They essentially try to boil words down to their simplest form.
Okay.
So running, ran, runner, they would all point back to the root verb run.
Makes sense. So it cuts through all the extra stuff and gets to the core meaning.
Right. And that leads to one of the most groundbreaking things about NLP, word embeddings.
Okay, now you've got me interested. Tell me more about these word embeddings.
Well, picture this. You have a map, right?
All right, okay.
But instead of cities, each point on this map is a word. And the closer the words are on the map, the closer their meanings are. So happy and joyful would be clustered together, while something like happy and ostrich would be, miles apart.
So it's like AI is building this web of how words relate to each other, not just seeing them as separate things.
Exactly. And this map, it's built from analyzing massive amounts of text. And it's what allows NLP models to really understand the nuances of language.
It's like giving AI emotional intelligence.
Right. And this ability to grasp how words relate in meaning, that's what fuels these powerful things called language models, which are the real powerhouses behind all of this.
Okay, so we've got these language models. They're learning to understand us. But how do they actually generate text themselves?
It's actually pretty amazing when you think about it. These language models, they're like prediction machines. They get really good at guessing what comes next in a sequence of words.
Kind of like a super advanced version of those finish the sentence games.
Yeah, exactly. But instead of just random guesses, they're making those predictions based on all the data they've been trained on. And the more data they have, the better those predictions get.
So it's all about pattern recognition, seeing how language usually flows and applying that to new situations.
Exactly. They take what you give them, analyze it using everything they know about language, and then spit out a bunch of possibilities for what comes next, word by word.
Okay, that makes sense. But wouldn't just picking the most likely word every time lead to some pretty, well, predictable text? Like, it would get boring fast.
You're right, it could. And that's where things get even more interesting. There are ways to control how the model makes those predictions, so you can find a balance between sticking to the expected and, like you said, keeping things interesting.
How do they do that?
One way is something called beam search. Imagine, instead of just considering one most likely path, the model explores several options at the same time.
Okay, so it's like branching out, looking at multiple storylines before choosing the best one.
Exactly. And the number of paths it explores, it's called the beam width, and that has a big impact on how creative or predictable the output is. Wider beam, more creativity, but it takes more computing power, so there's a trade-off.
So it's like choosing between sticking to the main road or taking a detour down a side street. You might discover something new. But how do we make sure these language models aren't just creating grammatically correct gibberish? How do we ensure the text is meaningful and relevant?
That's where context comes in. Humans, we rely on context all the time to understand each other, right? Language models need to do the same thing.
So it's not just knowing the definition of a word, but understanding how it's being used in that specific situation.
Exactly. And modern language models, they use something called attention to do this. It's like shining a spotlight on the most important parts of the input, the parts that really matter for understanding the meaning.
So instead of treating all words equally, it focuses on the ones that really matter in that moment.
Exactly. And that ability to focus, that's what lets them generate text that isn't just grammatically correct, but actually makes sense in context.
Attention, it's not just for kids in school anymore, huh? It's the key to AI that really gets us. Speaking of understanding, let's shift gears and talk about how these models are changing things like translation and summarizing information tasks that used to be really hard for machines to do. So we've talked about how these language models can understand and generate text in a way that feels I don't know, almost human. But where are we actually seeing this technology make a real difference?
One area where it's really shaking things up is machine translation. In the past, we've all seen those translation fails, right?
Oh, yeah? Where you try to translate something and it comes up totally nonsensical.
Totally.
Those are becoming less and less common. Language models are getting really good at understanding those subtle differences between languages, the nuances that trip up those older systems.
So no more relying on that friend who took a couple years of Spanish in high school.
Well, maybe still rely on your friend, but these language models, they're trained on massive amounts of text in tons of different languages.
Oh, yeah.
So they're not just translating word for word, they're actually starting to understand the meaning behind the words, the intent, even the culture. And that makes the translations way more accurate and natural sounding.
That's really cool. It's like we're breaking down communication barriers all over the world.
Exactly. Another area where this is a game changer is in summarizing all the information that's out there. I mean, think about how much we have to get through every day, right? Articles, reports, emails, it never ends.
It's true. It can be overwhelming. Right. So imagine having an AI assistant that could read through all of that and pull out the key points for you.
Okay, that would be amazing.
That's basically what text summarization is all about.
So no more spending hours trying to get through long, complicated documents.
Exactly. There are a couple different approaches, but one common one is called extractive summarization, where the model basically picks out the most important sentences from the original text and puts those together in a summary.
So it's like highlighting the important stuff for you.
Yeah. Exactly. Another approach, it's called abstractive summarization, and it's even cooler. Instead of just copying sentences, the model actually tries to understand the meaning of the whole thing and then write a new summary in its own words.
So it's not just copying and pasting, it's actually like interpreting the information and putting it into its own words.
Exactly. And that abstractive approach, it can create summaries that are a lot shorter and easier to understand than the original.
It's like having a personal AI writer who can take all that complex stuff and make it actually make sense. So we've talked about translation, summarization. What else can NLP do? I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Oh yeah, we've just barely scratched the surface. We're seeing it used everywhere. Chatbots, virtual assistants, analyzing how people feel about stuff, even generating code, all sorts of things.
Wow, AI is writing code now. Seems like the possibilities are pretty much endless.
They really are. It's a really exciting time to be working in this field. It feels like NLP is changing how we interact with technology and the world around us, and who knows what the future holds.
It's true. It's an exciting time to be learning about it too. So listener, as you're out there exploring the world of AI and NLP, just remember that it's more than just algorithms and data. It's about understanding how we communicate and shaping the future of how we'll communicate. Keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep your mind open to the incredible possibilities, because who knows what we'll be able to do with this technology in the years to come.